I've seen a couple of times. I mean, way back when, probably magazine articles. Um, but Lemmy, it's the kind of name your top 10 albums ever. And don't mean of Motorhead. I mean generally, like they're interviewing Lemmy, like any or even top five. I think was one thing they said. Name your top five albums, and I mean I know the Beatles was in there, probably the Ramones, and but he always put in Sacrifice, or certainly in these at least two times I saw it, he'd list his own album Sacrifice as one of his top five albums ever. I think one of the others is by the by, but I think one of the others was like ABBA. It was like, oh well, you like ABBA, and then he's like, yeah, you can actually like more than one type of music. Just because I'm in a heavy band doesn't mean that I can't appreciate good songwriting in another genre, as it were, which I always thought was a very true comment. Um, but yeah, that Sacrifice, he was very, very proud of that album enough that he, as I say, he chose it as one of his top five albums ever by any band. Um, so this one, it's after Bastards. Bastards got a couple of well, I mean they went heavy but acoustic-y type numbers, or more laid back like Don't Let Daddy Kiss Me and Several High Alone and Stranded on the Islands of the Damned. There is no one in here. I've completely forgotten that. Lost in the Ozone. So they had the kind of, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, not deviations, but experimentations. But Sacrifice is very much, bang, this is heavy. I think pretty much every track is just full on. I mean, they do a slight weird thing with that Make 'Em Blind one, which is sort of drum and Lemmy just playing chords on the bass and a sort of almost chanted type vocal type thing. But that aside, I mean, it was all sort of heavy. There's no acoustic-y stuff in that. There's a lot of like drop, if you're musically minded guitar, there's a lot of, I think, drop D tuning, which is for the really heavy riffs, like stuff like Over Your Shoulder. So, which is my way of building up to the fact that Würzel should have been really delighted with this album or pleased with it, because Würzel was the one who really disliked acoustic stuff on Motörhead Records. There's an interview with him in '94 when he said, I won't have anything to do with it. I don't know why we have to have them. He said it's ever since they did that I Ain't No Nice Guy on March or Die. And he said, I just give it to Phil Campbell could do all the acoustic bits and I just come in with the electric when it gets heavy. So he should have been delighted with this album. It's kind of back to what he wanted to be, but Würzel was extremely unhappy in the band and he was going to leave pretty much as soon as his album was released. Interviews with the other members, well, Mickey D, Lemmy and Phil Campbell, they said Würzel just sit there. They'd be exchanging ideas and stuff in the studio. He just sat there with his head down with his guitar across his lap, just not contributing in any way. If he had to play, then he would pick it up and play whatever just to do, get his part done. But there was no sort of creative input, and he was obviously deeply unhappy in the band and stuff. And then he randomly blah up at Lemmy to say, why are you the most famous person in the band and all this lot. I mean, I've addressed this in another video, but seeing as it's the album that he left on, it's worth repeating. I mean, Lemmy said to him, but you and me were like, it was almost, Lemmy had that thing like he used to have with Filth Animal Taylor. He had that thing with Würzel, like they were sort of the best mates. They were the jokers in the band. You see them being interviewed and they were sort of vibing off each other, whatever the thing is. And then people loved Würzel. Just it went beyond his musical talents, because Würzel was always such a likeable bloke. That massive grin. He was always cracking up laughing. You can imagine him getting in the beers, telling stories. And he'd had the whole thing about Motörhead was there was no airs or graces ever about the band. They weren't like, some band that he had to admire from afar, living in a world of private jets and stuff. I mean, Würzel, I think he was like, he had to lie. He lied about his age when he joined Motörhead. I think he was 35 when he joined. Well, Phil Campbell said he was older than he was. Phil Campbell was 24, I believe, and Würzel was at least 10 years older, 35, and he'd been a corporal in the army, and then he was working on building sites and stuff, thinking, am I ever actually going to do anything with in the music game? He's playing in pub bands and that. And so when he sent Lemmy the demo tape, when Lemmy advertised for two new guitar, or as he thought at the time, just one guitarist to replace Brian Robertson, he put an advert in just the English musical papers like NME and Melody Maker. Würzel sent in a tape with, as Lemmy said, a silly photo of Würzel with his dog. What do you call it? Dog Toots or something. Saying, I hear you looking for someone unknown. Well, there's no one more unknown than me. And Lemmy said that instantly warmed his heart towards Würzel. So, you know, Würzel was definitely, you know, a guy that people could warm to and feel close to. Well, you know, appreciate or whatever. And Lemmy said he by now just completely changed. He was, well, Lemmy said he was listening to the wrong voices, whatever that means. I mean, Wurzel's gone. That'd be, you know, I never speculate on someone's private life, but anyway, Lemmy's, you know, Lemmy said he was listening to the wrong voices, and these voices were telling Würzel stuff like, you know, Lemmy's taking your money, or the band that, you know, yeah, digging into your share of the money and stuff. And like Lemmy said, he said, I've got the royalties from going back way back to Hawkwind, yeah, plus early Motörhead, and you know, Motörhead's most successful time when they were selling the most albums and stuff, you know, after the Eddie Clark years. So he said, what do I want with Wurzel's money? But anyway, Wurzel's bringing all his voices, and then came to it. So on this album, Sacrifice, it varies between 1 or 2 solos that Wurzel's alleged meant to have done either way, i.e. not very many. Before, it was always Phil Campbell and Würzel. They were very sort of fair. They divide it almost equally, you know, or try and base the solos on each other's type of playing. You know, if there was 2 solos, they each have one each because it was a nice contrast, etc. Stuff like my memory is crap today. Killed by Death. That works really well with Phil Campbell playing the intro and then Würzel playing the solo. It's good contrast to the 2 guitars there. Because otherwise, a lot of the time, they were just kind of playing, you know, if one was playing the chord of A, the other one was just playing the chord of A. I mean, it wasn't like they could do much, they couldn't really separate the 2 guitars a lot of the time. Anyway, but that aside, so, but Würzel by now, he just had no interest in anything, which is in the bare minimum. And he had 1 or 2 solos. And apparently the solo he did play, or one of the 2 solos he did play, he took 6 hours to try and get it. And at the end, he couldn't get it. He slung down his guitar, went out to his car and drove off, and that was kind of it. He was out. There's also a thing, Lemmy, at the same time, Lemmy went on an English, like, an evening entertainment show. He played Ace of Spades with the in-house band. He sent anyone, it's Chris Evans, the DJ, who used to present it. Don't Forget Your Toothbrush, it was called. He played Ace of Spades and Good Golly Miss Molly, Lemmy did. And apparently Würzel phoned up the show, blew up at the show, and why wasn't I invited or something weird. But anyway, he kind of, you know, he was always having some difficulties. And he was out of the band, and Mickey D said it was just a big relief. You know, he said we really missed Würzel as a person, but as a player, he'd lost it. But anyway, so this was the last album that he was on. That's a long thing about Würzel there. Back to the Sacrifice, the album. Sacrifice and Man, just that song. Should they have put this song on first? Because it's just completely, I mean, how are you going to top Sacrifice on an album? The track Sacrifice. And that's the first track. Some Motörhead songs are just instant classics. Sacrifice is one of them for me. I mean, it's up there for Overkill. And like Orgasmatron, I mentioned those 2 songs because they're basically just a 1-note riff. And with Motörhead, a lot of it was just playing the riff, the 1-note thing in a different timing and stuff. And Sacrifice, yes, E, just. But you know, showcasing completely Mickey D's drums. And obviously live, in the middle, he'd often have a drum solo. And then they'd come back in. So just fantastic and great. I love the lyrics. Just Lemmy as a lyricist was just almost untouchable in my humble opinion. Really good. Why do they not believe? Just reminds me of like religious fanatics across the world. You know, your women live in shrouds, your children murder half the world and stuff. It's sacrifice, blood like ice, pay the price. Brilliant. Great. I love the video as well. It should be really cheesy, but because it's Motörhead, it really kind of works in a strange way. I think that's done with the 3 of them. That was afterwards I left that video. So Sacrifice, yeah, I'm always thinking that they should have like completely, should be the opposite, should be at the end, because it's like, how do you top Sacrifice as a song? But they did their best. Sex and Death, that song has really grown on me, actually, especially after I saw it. I've seen it on live videos. Really good song. Apparently they wrote this on the last day of recording. They kind of decided they needed another song, or they had this. Lemmy comes in first to the bass, then the guitars. Really good lyrics, classic Motörhead. Don't sweat it. Don't try and look for some deeper meaning. And that's life. This is life. Very very good. Good mental approach, I always think. Sex and Death, yeah, but it's really grown on me. Great song, and I think this is the song that when people say, a lot of people are like, oh, we're not metal, but they were a bit metal and they were a bit punk and stuff. And when they say that they love saying this about early Motörhead. Some people, Motörhead were not punk, They were, in the early days, they were more like pub rock, heavier pub rock, to be honest. But this one to me is kind of, they could almost be putting a foot into the punk camp slightly, just with that chord sequence, the DA thing. That's possibly just my opinion, but that kind of chord sequence kind of is quite punk-ish, but Motor just played it a lot faster and heavier. Over Your Shoulder, track number 3. Doesn't really do it for me on the album. I don't know, it's a bit leaden for me. But live, I love that track, great. And that's like, it's drop D for guitarists out there. It's drop D tuning, really really heavy. Then War for War, Order, Fade to Black. Yeah, really very very heavy. And Lemmy sort of going into his, I don't know, when on these songs I always imagine sort of armies of orcs and stuff, Lord of the Rings type. It's that kind of devils and horses advance, or this sort of thing. Dog-Faced Boy, that's written about Phil Campbell apparently. Yeah, K9 weirdo. Apparently, yeah, I think it's the song. Yeah, when Phil Campbell lands, and especially when they were in the States, he's straight away. They land at the airport, and before they play, Phil Campbell's hired a car, and he's off, bars looking for fun. All Gone to Hell, I like that song. Wide awake, wide awake. Was it Hear the Demons Hiss or something? Yeah, it's a good one. Make 'Em Blind. So that one, I said earlier, that sort of drum motif, and Lemmy sort of playing bass chords, and apparently, yeah, the guitar solo is Phil Campbell, who was drunk, he fell over a sofa, and they played the solo backwards or something. It's kind of the same story as like a few years before, or nearly 15 years before, when Faster Than Clark recorded the solo for We Are the Road Crew. There's that long feedback, which is feedback. Apparently, he'd fallen over a sofa. I was cracking up laughing. Don't Waste Your Time. So yeah, the standard Lemmy, Chuck Berry homage track, The Good Time Boogie. In Another Time. That's a good one. In Another Time. And Out of the Sun, which I really really like. And it's just on and insane, I alone remain. That wonderful. The structure of the song is slightly odd, because that sounds like the chorus, but they only ever play it once. So I would have, at least a couple more times, because it's such a great sing along, almost sort of punch the air type thing. But I really like, it's like some sort of wizard living in his cave. In this cove where I live, devils made of stone. Da, 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 da. I've completely forgotten the lyrics there. But yeah, that tree is blowing, ice and snow broken on the wheel. Yeah, I just imagine some old world-weary wizard living in his cave. So that was Out of the Sun. Sorry, that's the album Sacrifice. So yet again, Motörhead made a pretty good album with In the Face of Adversity, i.e. the Würzel business. But by the time it was released, Würzel was out. for me, it's not one of. It's just almost too heavy for me. Yeah, just too. It's pretty much full on, and a lot of people will love that. A lot of Motorhead fans will love that. I'm more of like, I mean, I love the album that come next, Overnight Sensation. It's just a lot more varied for me. So it's just a personal opinion. It's a lot more varied, whilst being Motorhead. That's what I always loved about Motorhead. They could do various things. That's why it's always bugging me. People, oh yeah, Motorhead doing Ace of Spades. And it's like, well, have you actually listened to many albums? Whereas Sacrifice, the album, it's all full on, it's full throttle, which I say should have played, not to go on about it, but should have pleased Würzel, which is what he's after. It didn't meet with any great success, arguably, I don't think, until almost 10 years later, Inferno. A lot of their albums really didn't sort of, they didn't shake up the music world as it was. A lot of the reviews were basically, even if they were favourable, was like, yeah, good old Motorhead doing it again. There's nothing there like, holy shit, hang a minute, like the 1916, wow, they're really doing something, and onto something here. They've shaken up a bit. It was more like, yeah, business as usual, great. And that was kind of it. The one thing this album had, which its predecessor, Bastards, didn't have, was good promotion, good distribution. It was distributed properly and people could get it in the shops. And the album, the artwork, the tongue of the whatever the hell that thing is, whatever they call it, a devil dog or something. It's a penis. I think on some album covers they changed it so it was a tongue or something. But yeah, great. Again, another great Joe Petagno cover. Yeah, definitely, yeah, he definitely added to the Motorhead legend. It was great covers. So yeah, that was Sacrifice, and now they're touring it, and they're back to a 3-piece. And there was Lemmy and Mickey thought they're going to have to get in another guitarist, but Phil said I can carry this off my own, and they realised after a couple of songs that it was fine. Phil could do it, and also it really got Phil Campbell out of his shell with all that running around and stuff. It really got him moving, and kind of changed Motorhead's whole stage presence. Before, Würzel was very much a headbanger, and Phil was sort of, well, Phil, hang on a minute, post there at my door. I was like, yeah, so yeah, it really got Phil Campbell out of his shell. I think I was saying Würzel was the headbanger running around the stage, and I remember Eddie Clark saying once that, he said, it's one thing I've got against Phil Campbell, because I think they got on. Eddie would join Motorhead at the bigger England gigs, for guest appearance and stuff. But Faster, he said, got let me stand there tall, giving it everything. He said Phil Campbell fucking waddling around on stage beside him. So Phil stopped waddling and was more like sort of jogging or running around on stage. And apparently Phil said on a good night he covers 10 miles, or he covered 10 miles. So he probably did some favours health wise with all the drinking and the smoking and stuff. But yeah, so that was Sacrifice.